Sometimes, life paints its most powerful lessons in the colors we least expect. This is the story of a boy who was born different, yet asked for nothing more than to be treated the same. On a bright morning in a quiet English town, the Wilson family celebrated the birth of their first child. A proud father, a gentle mother, a small hospital room filled with hope. But when the nurse handed the baby to his mother, the entire room went silent. His skin was dark, not the pale pink the Wilsons expected, not the light tone of his parents, but rich, deep brown, like the earth after rain. The doctor cleared his throat. Mrs. Wilson smiled nervously. "Maybe it's just the lighting," she whispered. But it wasn't. Their son, Ethan Wilson, was a black-skinned child born into a white family. From that very first breath, his existence became a question no one around him was ready to answer. Ethan grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. His parents loved him deeply, of that there was no doubt. They fed him, hugged him, took pictures of him. But every time they walked in public, they felt eyes on them. At the supermarket, old women whispered. At the park, mothers pulled their children closer. At church, someone always asked, "Oh, is he adopted?" Mr. Wilson would smile politely. Mrs. Wilson would say, "He's ours." And Ethan, barely 4, would just hold his mother's finger, wondering why people always looked at him that way. At home, he was free. He painted the walls with colors, built castles from boxes, and laughed louder than any other child on the street. But every time he looked in the mirror, a small voice asked, "Why am I not like them?" When school started, the questions grew sharper. One afternoon, a boy in class giggled, "You look dirty." Ethan frowned. "I had a bath." The class laughed. The teacher didn't say a word. That day, for the first time, Ethan rubbed his arm until it hurt, as if he could wash the color away. Ethan's parents tried to protect him. They told him, "You're special." They said, "Skin is just skin." But in the world outside, skin was everything. When Ethan was 8, the school held a family heritage day. Everyone came dressed in costumes that reflected their ancestry. His classmates wore Scottish kilts, English hats, Irish green. Ethan came in simple clothes. His mother had no idea what to make him wear. At the event, a teacher asked each student to stand and say where their family came from. When Ethan's turn came, he said proudly, "I'm from here." The teacher smiled awkwardly. "Yes, but your family? Your roots?" Ethan hesitated. "My parents are English." The class snickered. One boy muttered, "Then why aren't you?" Laughter filled the room. And that day, Ethan learned what it meant to be questioned for existing. After that, he stopped speaking much in class. He avoided group games. At lunch, he sat alone, drawing shapes, stories, anything that didn't stare back. His teacher wrote home, "Ethan is quiet but creative." His mother smiled reading it, unaware that quietness was his shield. Mr. Wilson, trying to cheer him up, said one night, "Son, don't care what people think. You're our pride." Ethan nodded, but deep inside, he wished he could trade pride for belonging. When his classmates played in the snow, he heard them say, "He doesn't look right in white." It stung like cold air on bare skin. He began to dream in silence. Dreams where everyone was the same color, and no one laughed at differences. One Sunday morning, during church service, Ethan walked in with his parents. As they took a seat, an elderly lady whispered loudly, "I didn't know the Wilsons had an African son." Mrs. Wilson turned red. Mr. Wilson squeezed his wife's hand, pretending not to hear. But Ethan heard. He always heard. After the service, he asked quietly, "Mom, am I adopted?" Mrs. Wilson's eyes filled with tears. By the time Ethan turned 12, he had learned 2 rules. Don't react. Don't expect fairness. At school, he was the black kid in the white family. Online, he saw jokes, memes, faces like his labeled as ghetto or dangerous. He didn't understand why color decided character. Then came the history lesson that changed everything. Mr. Graham, his history teacher, showed pictures of slavery. Chains, whips, dark skin bent under light hands. Some students turned to look at Ethan. He wished the ground would swallow him. Later, one boy joked, "Guess your ancestors worked hard, huh?" Laughter. Teacher's silence. Pain. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He stared at his reflection under the moonlight and whispered, "I wish I could just be normal." Mrs. Wilson found him sitting by the window. She hugged him gently. "Sweetheart, you are normal. You are beautiful. Don't let the world tell you otherwise." He asked softly, "Then why do they hate me?" She didn't have an answer. Because sometimes, love isn't enough to protect someone from the world. But she held him tighter and whispered, "The world fears what it doesn't understand." Those words stayed with him, though they didn't stop the pain. When Ethan turned 15, a new student joined his school, Noah Brown, a black boy adopted by another white family from the nearby city. For the first time, Ethan saw someone like him, someone who carried the same color, the same confusion. They became friends instantly. They talked about everything: music, basketball, food, and the feeling of being stared at. Noah laughed easily. He was loud, confident. He said, "Man, if they stare, let them. They wish they had our skin." Ethan admired that confidence. It felt like sunlight on frozen ground. Together, they faced teasing, but now they laughed it off. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel alone. But the peace didn't last long. One rainy afternoon, Ethan and Noah were walking home when a car slowed beside them. 3 older boys leaned out. "Hey, dark twins, lost your tribe?" One shouted. Noah ignored them. Ethan tried to smile. But then a can of soda flew out, splashed across Ethan's shirt. Laughter faded into the distance as the car drove away. Ethan froze. Noah clenched his fists. "Don't," Ethan said quietly. "They're not worth it." But that night, as he scrubbed his shirt, he realized something. They would always see color before character. That realization carved deep into his heart. Ethan started to write. Poems, short stories, letters he never sent. Each one began with the same line, "I didn't choose my color." Writing became his escape. Through words, he built a world where kindness mattered more than skin. His parents noticed his change. He smiled less, but his grades soared. Mrs. Wilson once found a note in his room. "Maybe God made me different so I could show others what love should look like." She wept holding it. Though Ethan loved his parents, there was always a silent space between them. The kind built not from lack of love, but from lack of understanding. At dinner, when his father joked about summer tans, Ethan smiled faintly. When his mother talked about that new black actor, Ethan tensed. They didn't mean harm, but sometimes innocence can still hurt. He didn't blame them. He just wished they saw the world through his eyes. Once, when Ethan turned 17, he got his first job at a local cafe. He was nervous but hopeful. Day 1, the manager said politely, "Nice to meet you, Ethan." Day 2, a customer asked, "Do you speak English well?" Day 3, a woman double-checked her change when he handed it over. He started noticing patterns. How people smiled differently at him. How some avoided eye contact. How laughter stopped when he entered a room. Every small act became a reminder that acceptance still had conditions. One evening, an elderly white man walked into the cafe. He looked frail, alone. Ethan served him tea with a quiet smile. The man looked up and said, "You remind me of my son." Ethan blinked. "Really?" The old man nodded. "He died in service years ago. Same kindness in your eyes." That single moment broke something and healed something inside Ethan, because it was proof that color couldn't hide humanity. A few weeks later, Ethan came home late. He overheard his parents arguing. Mr. Wilson's voice trembled. "I love him, but sometimes people look at us like we did something wrong." Mrs. Wilson replied softly, "We didn't, but they'll never understand." Ethan froze outside the door. Those words felt like confirmation of every silent doubt he'd carried. That night, he packed a small bag, left a note on his bed, and stepped out into the cold. "I'm not running away. I'm finding where I belong." He took the last train to the city to start fresh. The city was loud, crowded, diverse. For the first time, he saw faces of every color walking side by side. He found work at a bookstore, shared a flat with Noah, and felt almost free. But inside, the old questions lingered. Who am I? Where do I belong? Sometimes he'd stand before a mirror and trace the curve of his skin, whispering, "This is me. But why do I have to prove it every day?" He started writing again. Stories of children who looked like him, loved like him, hurt like him, and somewhere inside, a new dream began. To help other kids understand they were enough. Ethan's story had only just begun. He had escaped the walls of his hometown, but not the chains of society's judgment. Ahead lay the challenges of adulthood, love, prejudice, identity, and the test of forgiveness. Would he finally find peace in his own color? Or would the world's shadow always follow him? Sometimes, leaving home isn't about distance. It's about finding the courage to belong, even when the world says you don't. This is the story of how Ethan Wilson, once a boy questioned for his color, learned to stand tall and speak for millions who never could. The city was different. No one cared who your parents were. No one asked where you came from, at least not at first. Ethan shared a small apartment with Noah. They were both working part-time and chasing dreams that didn't yet have names. By day, Ethan stacked books and brewed coffee. By night, he wrote stories about children who never saw themselves in fairy tales. Children who were always the outsiders. Noah would joke, "Bro, one day you'll be famous. People will cry reading your stories." Ethan would smile faintly. "I don't want fame. I just want them to listen." Even in the city, prejudice had new shapes. It wore suits, spoke politely, but it still cut deep. At his bookstore job, customers often mistook him for security staff. One woman once asked, "Do you work here? Or, you just standing around?" Ethan forced a smile and said, "Yes, ma'am. I work here." His manager apologized later, but apologies couldn't wash away humiliation. At night, Ethan poured it all into his writing. He wrote about the sting of stereotypes, the loneliness of being the only one, and the quiet rebellion of existing proudly. He didn't know it yet, but those words would one day change lives. One morning, he received a call from his mother. Her voice was soft, cautious. "Ethan, it's been 2 years. We miss you." Silence. He wanted to say he missed them too. He wanted to say he forgave them for their silence. But all that came out was, "I'm okay, Mom." After hanging up, he sat quietly, guilt twisting inside him. He missed home, but he couldn't go back until he understood who he was. Later that week, a letter arrived at the bookstore. It was unsigned, written in shaky handwriting. "Dear Ethan, I watched you at the cafe once. You smiled even when people were rude. My son looks like you, and he's scared of school. Thank you for being kind. It gave me hope." Ethan stared at the letter for a long time. He had no idea who sent it, but it felt like destiny had just whispered, "You matter." That night, Noah found Ethan typing furiously on his laptop. "What's this?" he asked. Ethan replied, "A story, but not fiction this time. My life." He posted it online under the title, "Born in White Hands, Raised in a Colored Skin." The post went viral overnight. Thousands shared it. Hundreds commented, telling their own experiences. People wrote things like, "I thought I was alone. You put into words what I felt all my life. Thank you for speaking truth." Ethan sat reading every comment, tears welling up. For the first time, his pain had become power. Soon, news outlets picked up his story. He was invited to speak at a youth conference about racial identity and belonging. Ethan stood backstage, palms sweaty, heart pounding. He looked at the crowd, faces of all colors, waiting to hear him. When the lights dimmed and his name was called, he stepped forward and said softly, "All my life, people asked me who I am. Today, I finally know. I'm human, and that's enough." Silence filled the hall. Then applause. Then tears. That single moment changed everything. After that, Ethan began visiting schools and youth centers. He told kids that their worth wasn't tied to their skin, that love doesn't come with shades. He met children who reminded him of himself, shy, confused, scared to be seen. One small girl asked him, "Why did God make me brown if everyone likes white better?" Ethan knelt beside her and said, "Because God wanted the world to look like a garden, not a snowfield." The girl smiled, the kind of smile that heals generations. But not everyone liked his message. Online, hate comments flooded his page. "Stop playing the victim. Race isn't real. Stop spreading division. Go back where you came from." Ethan could have ignored them, but he decided to respond with kindness. He wrote, "I'm not dividing anyone. I'm reminding us we're already one." The hate didn't stop, but neither did he. Because now he wasn't speaking just for himself. He was speaking for every child who ever felt small for being different. 3 years later, Ethan returned home for the first time. The town hadn't changed much. The same quiet streets, the same curious eyes. His parents stood at the doorway, older, gentler, waiting. Mrs. Wilson whispered through tears, "We're sorry, Ethan." He hugged her tightly. "You don't have to be sorry for what you didn't do. Just see me." Mr. Wilson's eyes filled. "We see you now, son." It was a moment of healing that words could barely describe. Ethan's writings were eventually published under the title, Born Unique. It became a bestseller in schools, spreading messages of empathy and equality. In interviews, he always said the same thing. "My parents didn't teach me racism. Society did. But I learned love from them, and that's what I teach back." He donated part of his earnings to scholarships for minority children, helping those who faced the same rejection he once did. At a charity event, Ethan met Clara, a teacher passionate about social justice. She was white, but she saw beyond skin. They talked for hours about change, identity, and the dream of a world without prejudice. Years later, they married quietly, surrounded by friends of every color. When their first child was born, a girl with skin the color of light caramel, Ethan wept. Not because she looked like him or Clara, but because she looked like love itself. He whispered to her, "You will never have to question why you belong." At 30, Ethan was invited to give a global talk on equality. He stood before a hall filled with thousands, lights bright, cameras rolling. He began softly, "When I was born, people saw a mistake. But I wasn't a mistake. I was a message. My life taught me that racism isn't born. It's taught. And if it's taught, it can be unlearned. Every child deserves to grow up without mirrors being used as weapons." The audience rose in applause, some crying, some smiling, but everyone listening. In that moment, Ethan wasn't just a boy born in the wrong color. He was the voice of everyone ever silenced by it. Years later, children would read his stories in schools. Teachers would quote his words, "Born unique, still human." Parents would remind their kids, "Kindness sees no color." And somewhere, a child who once hated their reflection would smile again. Ethan's journey began with a single question, "Why am I different?" But it ended with an answer the whole world needed to hear. Different isn't less. In a world that often divides by shade, he proved that humanity is the color that binds us all. Born unique, yet human. Because equality should never depend on color. Moral message: every child, no matter their skin, deserves love, respect, and equality. Change doesn't start in governments or speeches. It starts in how we treat the child next to us.